Nice launch trajectory and countdown net. Pad is clear.
10, 9, 8.
Launch auto sequence
7,
has started.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go for launch.
Vehicle is supersonic.
Stage separation confirmed. Dragon, separation confirmed. Stage 1 is transonic. Landing legs have deployed. And Falcon 9 has landed.
T-minus 30 seconds. Seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power and liftoff of SES mPOWER. Go Falcon 9, go SES.
Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Kerbal Space Center in Florida, carrying the O3b mPOWER satellites to orbit. Here's a great view from the first stage, looking down at those Merlin 1D engines. Now, during the ascent, we've begun tilting the engines. That's called gimbling. We've begun actually moving horizontally away from the launch pad in a maneuver called a gravity turn. We're still mostly going up. As you can see, the altitude is increasing, but we're also starting to go horizontally away from the pad, and ultimately it's that horizontal speed that will get us to orbit. I apologize, I just talked over the call out there for max Q. That is the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure and the highest stresses on the vehicle during the ascent. Now, the rocket needs to go about 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid getting pulled back to Earth. So we'll be continuing to accelerate the vehicle in preparation for several events we've got coming up in about a minute. The first of those will be main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and then second engine start number 1. Now, main engine cutoff is where we shut down all 9 of these Merlin 1D engines in preparation for separation of the 2 stages, and then followed shortly after by second engine start number 1. We heard a call out there for MVAC chill in. That means we've begun to chill in the turbo pumps on the second stage in preparation for full flow of the Merlin vacuum engine and ignition at about the T+244 mark. So again, coming up, main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and then SES-1.
Nico.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
Great views. Left-hand side of your screen is looking up through the inner stage where the Merlin vacuum was sitting. You can see that's now a first stage view of the grid fins deploying. Right-hand side of your screen is that Merlin vacuum engine having started its burn. It'll continue burning for about the next 5 minutes. Next major milestone will be deployment of the fairing halves.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Great shot. On the right-hand side of your screen is the top of the payload adapter. And on the, sometimes we can catch the fairing halves jettisoning away in this view on the Merlin vacuum. Now again, we'll be attempting to retrieve these fairing halves once they fall back to planet Earth on a recovery vessel named Bob. you're just joining us, welcome.
Acquisition of signal, Bermuda.
About T+4 minutes into today's mission, had an on-time liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida. On the left-hand side of your screen is Falcon 9's first stage, using some attitude gas to reorient itself for its next major event, which is the entry burn. And on the right-hand side of your screen, we've got a great view of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. About a little more than a minute into its first burn, and it is carrying the mPOWER O3b mPOWER satellites to orbit. We're carrying 2 today on today's mission for our customer SES. Next major event is going to happen on the first stage, which is on the left-hand side of your screen. That'll be the entry burn. During the entry burn, we relight 3 of the Merlin 1D engines on the first stage, the center engine, followed shortly after by 2 of the radial engines. And we do that to slow down the vehicle. And that helps us reduce the re-entry forces and heating, and ultimately allows us to recover and reuse that first stage. So right now, the first stage is periodically doing some bursts of its attitude control gas. We're trying to get the engines pointed back towards the Earth, so we can slow ourselves down once we get to the entry burn time, that in about a minute from now. Now this view is of our Merlin vacuum engine. We've got cameras on either side of the engine. You can see the glow of the nozzle from those hot exhaust gases, transferring heat into the engine, and that heat is radiating away to the cool background of space. Now, during re-entry on the first stage, we actually put that nice layer of soot on the first stage. That soot actually comes from flying through the rocket's exhaust gases. You can see that we're still going extremely fast, about 8,000 kilometers per hour on the first stage. That'll slow down as we do the entry burn, but the rocket's plume, which is carbon-based, ends up coming back onto the surface of the rocket and leaves that nice layer of soot that you see on our flight-proven boosters. Entry burn scheduled to start here in about 10 seconds. Keep an eye out for that on the left-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 FTS is safe.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Successful entry burn startup. This burn lasting just about a little over 20 seconds. You can see that our speed is rapidly decreasing.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And shutdown of those 3 Merlin 1D engines. Again, we do this burn to help with reusability, and really reusability is the key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, and that enables more investments in critical scientific research and missions like today's payload. The Falcon 9 first stage that supported today's mission will be performing its landing burn for the 8th time. It's previously supported a number of missions, including the cargo resupply missions 22 and 25, crewed missions 3 and 4, Turksat 5b, Eutelsat HOTBIRD 13, and a Starlink mission, and of course today's mPOWER mission. Next major event is actually shutdown of the Merlin vacuum engine
Stage 2
that we
FTS
see
is safe.
on our screen. Now, the Merlin engines are optimized for thrust in...
MVAC shutdown.
They're optimized for thrust in the vacuum of space. They actually have an extremely long nozzle compared to the Merlin 1Ds. We had our call out there for shutdown on the...
Nominal orbit insertion.
On the Merlin vacuum engine, as well as a call out of nominal orbit insertion. Now, it sounds like we're having a little bit of telemetry issues with the first stage. Should have started its landing burn at about the T plus 8 minute 24 second mark.
Expected loss of signal, Cape.
So the landing burn sequence, we start a single Merlin engine on the first stage. And by now, hopefully we would have landed on our drone ship. We'll see if we can get some more information from the launch team once we get telemetry back. So at this point, the mission is not over yet. We've just completed the first of 3 burns on this Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. We're in our first parking orbit. Our next burn coming up on the second stage will be coming up after this coast phase. We'll ignite for a second time for a short burn, and then a third burn after that, a little bit longer after. So we'll see you back here in about the T plus 27 minute mark for second engine start number 2. See you back in about 17 minutes. In the meantime, enjoy the space tunes.
Expected loss of signal, Bermuda.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Welcome back to our webcast coverage of the Falcon 9 mission carrying the O3b mPOWER satellites for our customer, SES. Now, Falcon 9 launched at 5:48 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. We had a successful liftoff, main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation and a first burn on our Merlin vacuum engine. Now, before the coast phase, we were having some issues with telemetry. We weren't able to get live views of the first stage landing, but we did get confirmation over the coast period that we had a successful first stage landing. That marks our 157th recovery of an orbital class booster and the 8th landing for this particular first stage. Now, we're coming up on the second relight and shutdown of our Merlin vacuum engine, or SES-2. Over the coast phase, we also heard that our telemetry and real-time telemetry may not be available for this burn, so we're going to keep an eye out and see if we can get any data during the burn. That burn expected to start in about 5 seconds.
Second engine startup.
So call it on the loops there for second engine start number 2. This is a 30-second burn.
S2 burn 2.
30-second burn. This is raising the apogee, or the highest point of our orbit for the mPOWER satellites.
Shutdown.
There's a call out from the ground operators. So we'll be taking a look at the performance of the burn to confirm that we're in the expected orbit. Now, this is the second of 3 expected burns. We have one more scheduled about an hour and 20 minutes from now. And conversation on the loops right now sounds like we're going to do a quick data review, make sure we're in the target orbit. So we'll come back with an update once we have that information. As I mentioned, the third and final burn of our second stage should occur in about 80 minutes, around the T+1 hour, 49-minute mark. And so we'll have an update for you then on the performance of the second burn. In the meantime, we're going to leave you with some more views from space. We do have additional ground stations, as well as some space jams, so we'll see you back then.
signal, Capone.
Acquisition of signal, RW stock.
Nominal SECO to orbit insertion.
Acquisition of signal, Maldives. Expected loss of signal, HBK. Australia.
Welcome back to our webcast coverage for the O3b mPOWER mission. Now, so far in the mission, we had an on-time liftoff at 5:48 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40, followed by successful ascent, stage separation, a first stage landing, and 2 second stage engine burns. If you've been following along, we did hear during the previous coast period confirmation of a good orbital insertion after SES-2 on the nets. We're now coming up on the third and final second stage burn for today's mission. That will happen at about T+1 hour, 49 minutes, and 52 seconds. This burn will be a relatively quick burn, another 30 seconds, and you'll hear that call out as SES-1 or SES-3, second engine start number 3. And there you can see the Merlin vacuum engine is ignited for its third time. Again, a short burn, just under 30 seconds. You can see here that we're increasing the speed. Our current altitude is staying the same because we're at the highest point of our orbit. So we're raising the perigee a little bit. And with that, we just had confirmation of second engine cutoff, number 3.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And with that call out from the ground teams, we are in the expected orbit. Now, as a reminder, the O3b mPOWER satellites are still attached to Falcon 9's second stage. They're on the very top of the rocket. We've got the first of 2 payload deployment events happening in just about 3 minutes. Now, these 2 mPOWER satellites, the O3b mPOWER satellites, are for our customer SES. The O3b mPOWER communication system comprises an initial constellation of 11 high-throughput and low-latency satellites, as well as SES's extensive ground infrastructure. And these satellites were collaboratively designed by SES and the Boeing company. These satellites are the second generation of the medium Earth orbit, or MEO system, that has been delivering high-performance communications to a multitude of services since 2014, to a variety of different customers operating in 50 countries today. These connectivity services range from 50 megabits per second to multiple gigabits per second and support mobile network operators, cruise ships, energy companies, as well as governments and institutions around the globe. Now, I mentioned medium Earth orbit earlier. There's a number of different sort of large payload, orbit groups that satellites go to. These satellites are headed about 8,000 kilometers away from the Earth's surface. You can see right now our altitude is about 7,000 kilometers. So once we deploy these satellites, they'll have a little bit of work to do to reach their final targeted orbit.
First mPOWER spacecraft, separation confirmed.
It looks like we have a confirmation via telemetry of the first spacecraft separation. Maybe we'll get a shot of it here in view. If you recall from earlier in the webcast, both these satellites are stacked on top of each other, but successful deploy via telemetry. So with that, we have one more major milestone. That is deployment of this second and final spacecraft of the SES O3b mPOWER mission for today. That deployment is scheduled to happen about 6 minutes from now, so we're going to leave you with some space views, and we'll be back shortly for final payload deploy. Welcome. We are nearing the end of our mission today for our customer, SES. Now, about 6 minutes ago, we deployed the first O3b mPOWER satellite and are awaiting deployment of the second and final payload. As a reminder, the O3b mPOWER system is capable of delivering connectivity services ranging from 50 megabits per second to multiple gigabits per second to multiple mobile network operators, cruise ships, energy companies, and governments and institutions around the world. The O3b system has been delivering high-performance communications to customers since 2014 across 50 different countries. Now, we're coming up on payload deploy. We're looking right now at a live view of the second stage up at the second mPOWER spacecraft, and coming up shortly on payload deploy.
Second mPOWER spacecraft, separation confirmed.
And there was confirmation via telemetry of the second spacecraft separation. And it looks like what we have on screen is actually the payload adapter fitting, so we may not get a view of the spacecraft separating. So with that, we're going to end our coverage of the O3b mPOWER mission. From all of us here at SpaceX, we want to give a big shout out to our customer, SES, for entrusting us with today's mission. We also want to give a shout out to the Range and the Federal Aviation Administration for supporting us. This launch concludes our 196th overall mission to date and our 58th launch this year. Thank you, all our viewers, for tuning in and for your continued support. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you for the next launch.